The bat wings of the golden horseshoe bang open, and a man staggers through tall, sun-browned, and carrying the kind of loneliness you can smell on his clothes right along with the whiskey. Spurs tick the floorboards. Smoke curls up to the rafters. It's well past midnight in Cheyenne Creek, Wyoming territory, and the saloon is still a pot that won't stop boiling glasses clinking, piano half a beat out of tune, laughter that comes from the belly and never reaches the eyes. Luke Morrison blinks through the haze, blue eyes a little unfocused, hair shoved back under a battered Stetson. 28, lean as rawhide, trail dust ground into his shirt, and a dark damp speckled where somebody's drink found him first. He plants a hand on the bar to steady himself, scanning the room like a hawk that's flown into a chimney. Morrison. Jake Hartley booms from the corner poker table. The cattle baron sits like a man who never lost a hand or a dollar. Bring that jingle over here. We're running low on luck. Luke fishes in his vest, finds the last crumpled 20 of his month's pay, and smirks because pride works even when common sense doesn't. Heel me in, he says, letting himself drop into the empty chair like a man stepping off a horse he's ridden too far. Around him are faces he knows. Hartley with his fat wallet and fatter ego. Samuel Blackwood, the banker, who smiles with his teeth and not his soul, and Tom Snake Eye Sullivan, a slick gambler whose eyes are winter gray and never blink at the right time. Luke gives Snake Eye a look that says, I know what you are, and Snake Eye gives him one back that says, and still you sat down. Cards whisper across felt. Whiskey breath mixes with cigar smoke. At first the night leans Luke's way. He plays loose, too loose, but the cards keep tumbling right. Coins chink and shift his way. Lady Luck's cozying up to you tonight, Blackwood says, dabbing a silk handkerchief at his brow. About time she noticed, Luke shoots back, grinning lopsided, and raises when he ought to fold, because the whiskey tells him he's invincible. But the wheel always comes back around. Sometime after the bottle goes hollow, the tide turns. Winds thin out. The little piles in front of him shrink like snow under April sun. By 3 a.m, he's cleaned out down to his saddle, his rifle, and the bay gelding tied outside. He shoves his chair back. I'm done. Hold up, Snake Eye purrs, casual as a cat about to pounce. Table's not finished with you. I'll stake you 101 hand. Winner takes the whole pot. Every part of Luke that has kept him alive in storm and stampede tells him to walk. But the liquor is loud, and the crowd is louder. Pride stings. What's the hitch? No hitch. Snake Eye laces his fingers together like a preacher about to bless a meal. Just a condition. If you lose, you do one thing I ask. Legal, quick. Entertainment for the good people of Cheyenne Creek. Hartley chuckles, and it sounds like a warning Luke doesn't heed. He thinks of a small spread he's dreamed about since boyhood, his land, his fence posts, his sky. $100 would jumpstart that dream. Deal. The saloon swells around them, men crowding in, breath warm, eyes brighter than the lanterns. Snake Eye deals like he was born with cards in his hands. Luke peeks, 2 pair kings and 7s. Not a trumpeter, not a funeral march. He keeps one draw, reaches for luck, and pulls a 7. Full house. His pulse kicks. He pushes the borrowed money in. All in. Snake Eye holds his stare a long, icy second, then matches the bet with a flick like he's tipping a hat to a lady he means to ruin. Show. Luke spreads his cards triumphant. 7s over kings. For a heartbeat, the whole room is a drawn breath. Then Snake Eye laughs the way gravel sounds under a wagon wheel. He lays them down one at a time, savoring it. Queen, 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 queen. Luke's stomach drops clean through the floor. 4 queens. He's lost the money, the last of his pride, maybe the rest of his life, depending on what that one thing turns out to be. "No," Snake Eye says, lighting a cigar slow enough to be cruel, "about the condition. You're going to marry the widow Johnson." The room bursts into ugly hilarity. Boots stomp. Someone whistles. Luke's jaw locks. "You're drunker than I am." "Amara Johnson," Blackwood adds, oily voice carrying. "Lives out by Copper Creek. Husband died in the mine collapse last spring." He tugs his vest straight and smiles with his eyes closed. "I hold the note on her land. She marries you by week's end, or I foreclose. Papers are ready." Luke looks around at the faces men he's worked beside, ridden with, bled near. What he sees isn't friendship. It's mean amusement and a hunger for spectacle. The trap reveals itself all at once. Rigged cards, a banker's threats, a gambler's performative charity. His throat tastes like metal. Why? He asks, what's the game behind the game? Snake Eye blows a smoke ring up into the lamplight. Certain folks want that acreage. Water rights, he shrugs. This way, everybody gets their prize. Blackwood gets his papers signed one way or the other. We get a show. You get to keep your word. A man can be poor, drunk, stubborn, and still have laws he won't break. Out here, a promise is a fence that keeps your name from wandering into the ditch. Luke leans a knuckle on the table until his skin goes white. 3 days, he says hoarsely, and stumbles out into cold pre-dawn air that cuts soberness into him like a knife. He stands by the hitch rail, breathing hard, trying not to heave. Somewhere a rooster thinks about crowing. Stars fade. He realizes he's just signed an innocent woman into his mess, and the shame of that sobers him faster than any winter wind. 3 days later, the church, on the edge of town, is full enough to break the boards. Folks have turned out like it's Founder's Day, and the traveling circus rolled in. Luke wears his least filthy shirt and a look like a man headed to the gallows. He stands at the front beside Reverend Mills, who flips through his Bible so fast you'd think he's late for a train out. The door opens. Amara Johnson steps in, and the room hushes the way prairie grass lays flat in a sudden gust. She's tall, carrying herself with a dignity that does not ask permission. A simple blue dress, mended neat. Hair swept back elegant. But it's her eyes that reach Luke deep, steady, old with things a woman shouldn't have to be old with. She walks like she's already met humiliation and decided it won't be her master. "Miss Johnson," Luke says under his breath as she reaches him. "I save it," she replies, voice low and even, not unkind. "We both know the price of other men's fun. Let's finish it." Reverend Mills speeds through the vows like he's swallowing medicine. When he asks for objections, the congregation cackles like jackdaws in a cottonwood. Luke stares straight ahead, jaw set. Amara doesn't flinch. When the Reverend pronounces them husband and wife, the bell clangs like laughter rolling down the valley. They turn to face the crowd. For one heartbeat, Luke meets Amara's gaze, and something passes between them, acknowledgement maybe. Not alliance yet, not forgiveness, but the shared understanding of two people who didn't choose this and will not be broken by the choosing. He offers his arm. After a tiny pause, she takes it. They walk through the gauntlet of jeers and whispers and step into the bright Wyoming sun, bound by law if not by will. On the wagon ride to Luke's cabin, Amara is quiet, looking out over brown grass that shivers in the wind. The little place sits 5 miles out, a wood box on the sea of prairie with mountains far like blue ghosts. He helps her down, awkward, suddenly aware of every rough edge in his life. "It isn't much," he says, striking a match for the lamp. Yellow light spills over a bed, a pot-bellied stove, a scarred table, shelves with a few plates and less food. "Built it with my own hands." "I've seen worse," she answers, stepping inside. She sets down a small carpet bag, everything she was allowed to bring. a Bible, a silver brush, a framed photograph, a quilt folded careful as a prayer. Did you make that? He asks when she hangs the quilt on a peg. The patterns are unlike anything his ma pieced back in Missouri, bold, geometric, like stories drawn in thread. My mother taught me, she says softly. Her mother taught her. Patterns from far away, carried forward. There's a silence that isn't unfriendly. He puts wood in the stove like it matters enormously. Look, he says at last, clearing his throat. You take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. No, she doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. People watch. They talk. I won't give them extra ammunition. You'll sleep inside. You're not getting pneumonia to protect my reputation, but you'll sleep by the stove. For now. He nods, not because she ordered him, but because she's right, and because he respects that she knows it. As he spreads blankets on the floor, she unpacks. He notices how carefully she touches each thing, as if each object is a tether to a past already trying to blow away. Why agree? He asks finally, keeping his eyes on the fire. You could have fought Blackwood. Her laugh is small and without mirth. A colored widow against a white banker? In this territory? She doesn't need to say more. The fairness he believes in is not the fairness she's been offered. They eat what little there is biscuits from the flour. She measures out like gold dust, the last strips of bacon. She moves like someone who has survived by being useful. Before bed, he forces himself to say the decent thing. Listen, I won't ask anything of you you don't choose. This marriage may be iron on paper, but I won't make it chains. In the dark, his bedroll crackles when he shifts. Luke, she says from the bed, the name sounding strange and right at once. I intend to keep my dignity, whatever else I lose. Then we start there, he says to the rafters, and hears her breathe out like it's the first agreeable sentence she's been offered in a week. Dawn scrapes the horizon raw and climbs the cabin wall. When Luke wakes, coffee already scents the air. Amara is up, feeding the stove, sleeves rolled. You didn't have to, he begins. I won't be a burden, she cuts in, not sharp, simply factual. I pay my way. They eat in a quiet that's not tense. He can see she rationed her portion by habit. We need supplies, he says. And you need clothes for cold weather. We'll go to town. Her shoulders tighten. I have what I need. He shakes his head. You're my wife now by law, he adds quickly, and that makes what's mine yours. If folks are going to whisper anyway, they can get their money's worth. An hour later, they ride in Luke on his bay, Amara astride the gentler moray he uses for packs. She sits a saddle like she was born to it, back straight, hands sure. You ride well, he says before he can stop himself. My husband taught me, she answers. The first husband, the one the earth took without asking permission. The grief in her voice is clean, like a riverbed stripped to stone. He wishes he could pull the words back, but there's no pulling back the past. Cheyenne Creek sees them coming like a storm. Heads turn. People pool on boardwalks, curiosity souring into judgment before the horses are even hitched. Luke ties off and offers his hand. Amara ignores it then, after a heartbeat, takes it anyway, because two people walking shoulder to shoulder say something a lone woman does not get to say here. Martha Henderson stands in the doorway of her general store, false sympathy pasted on. Why, Luke, so soon after the happy event? Her gaze slides to Amara like oil down glass. Mrs. Morrison. Morning, Luke says evenly. We'll need yard goods, warm blankets, flour, salt, coffee, and a decent pair of boots. Inside, the room freezes around them. He steers Amara to the bolts of cloth. Pick what you need. Don't skimp. Winter's coming. She hesitates, torn between necessity and the humiliation of taking. That calico will fray, comes a voice that doesn't sound like mockery. Eleanor Patterson Rancher's wife, spine like stove, iron steps closer. The blue wool will last longer. She looks Amara up and down and smiles, small but real. Welcome, Mrs. Morrison. The two words land like a cup of water in August. Amara nods, surprise flickering in her eyes. They buy what they can. At the feed store, old Charlie Banks refuses them until Luke's stare makes him blush and take their coin. At the butcher, the good cuts are spoken for. Never mind that they sit right there in the case dot at the bank. Blackwood floats out of his office like a vulture catching a thermal. The happy couple, he says loudly. Any difficulties in the adjustment? Luke's fists ball, but before he can choose a mistake, Amara slides a hand to his sleeve, a gentle anchor he didn't expect. None at all, Mr. Blackwood, she says, polite and deadly. Disappointment can be hard on a man. I hope you manage yours. His smile thins. She gives him hers, which is not a smile at all, just a drawing back of dignity like a blade into its sheath. On the ride home, the prairie is a wide brown ocean under a vault of blue. Dust devils dance and collapse. They ride mostly in silence until Luke asks, "When did you last eat proper?" "I manage," she says, which is not an answer. "How long?" A long pause, and then, almost inaudible, 3 days before the wedding. "I sold what I had left to pay for a dress decent enough to shame no one but me." He swears softly, turns his horse toward home, and when they get there, he sets her at the table and cooks like a penitent, nothing fancy, but plenty. She eats slow at first, then faster when her body wins the argument with her pride. "Thank you," she says when the plates are clean. "For today." "For not," she gestures toward town, toward all the ways the day could have gone worse. "You could have made it cruel. We didn't pick this," he says. "But we can decide how we carry it. We can either make each other miserable or build something that keeps out the wine." She studies him like he's a problem to be solved, then nods once. "You're not what I expected. What did you expect?" "Anger, resentment, a man who'd need to remind me what he'd lost." A ghost of a smile touches her mouth. "Instead, I find a man who says 'we' without noticing." That night, he rolls out his blankets again. He's settling in when her voice crosses the dark. "Luke, the bed is wide. Put a blanket down the middle. A beat. You'll ruin your back on the floor." He hesitates because the distance has felt like respect, and because he's not sure he can be that close without wanting something he promised not to take. But she's right, and exhaustion wins. They lay on their halves, a ridge of folded wool between them, like a fence with a gate no one has tried yet. The cabin creaks. The wind fingers the eaves. Somewhere a coyote throws its voice at the moon. "Back at the church," she says into the quiet, "you muttered the game wasn't done." "What did you mean?" He stares into the dark where the ceiling beams line up like tracks to another life. "That Snake Eye and Blackwood think they set all the rules," he breathes out. "But they don't get to decide how the story ends." "Good," she whispers. "Because I don't plan to lose." Days begin to take on shape. She's up before dawn, coaxing the stove to life, coffee humming low in the pot. He tends the horses, checks the fence, accounts for feed. She's useful in every corner of a day hauling water, mending, taking to milking like she's done it before, setting a snare line along the draw. When he says, "You don't have to," she says, "Idle hands are the devil's workshop," and there's a hint of humor under it that makes his chest loosen. He mentions a broken stretch of fence, and she appears with gloves and wire, determined. When a bawling calf drops into the slick clay of a wash, she's knee-deep before he can blink, shoulder to shoulder pulling the little beast to safety. "Where'd you learn to tackle everything?" he asks, braced and impressed. "When there are only two of you," she says, brushing mud from her skirt. Everyone does everything. 2 weeks pass. Just before dawn one morning, the ground starts to tremble with hoofbeats that don't belong to their stock. Luke's hand goes to the rifle on habit. He peeks through the window slit and counts silhouettes 5 riders fanning out, hollering in that way men use when they want to sound bigger than they are. "Morrison," a voice calls. "We heard you've got good horseflesh penned up. Walk out, hands high, and maybe we leave the cabin standing." Luke sets his jaw. Those horses are his living. And the note the voice added about maybe hits a fuse. "You best keep riding," he shouts back. Next range over is friendly to thieves. Laughter, dirty and mean. Big talk from a man with a colored wife. Maybe we take her for our trouble. See if she's as... The shotgun roars before he can finish. One of the riders yelps, clutching his shoulder, saddle slick with sudden red. "The next shot finds your heart," Amara says from the window, voice like bedrock. "I buried one husband. I'm not soft enough to bury another." The men curse, scatter. Somebody barks orders. "Smoke 'em out. Hit the barn first." Kerosene sloshes. The reek pushes through the cracks. Luke leans close to Amara. "Keep them looking this way." She nods, steady as a fence post, and fires again, splintering a post by the pump to make them duck. Luke slips out the back, moving low, circling wide through brush and shadow. They've left one man minding the horses. Luke comes up behind, raps him with the butt of his rifle. The man folds to dirt without a meeting of minds. Luke eases the pistol from his belt and stalks toward the barn where 2 shadows splash kerosene, laughing about what they'll do when the flames start licking. "Drop it," Luke says, and one turns too fast. Luke's shot finds meat, not bone. The man goes down screaming, alive enough to learn a lesson later. The other throws up his hands. Before anything else can happen, the air itself changes. A low moan, like the world inhaling. On the horizon, a brown wall rears up, sunlight bleeding through it orange. Dust storm, horses. Someone yells, and the thieves break for their mounts like quail flushed from brush. Luke lets them go. The storm will thin the herd, one way or another. He sprints for the cabin. Inside, he shouts. Amara doesn't argue. They slam the door and jam the bar as the storm hits like a freight train of sand. The cabin shudders. Wind howls through every chink. Dust finds every seam, every breath. The lamp hisses out. Luke gropes across the dark to her, finds her by the stove, pulls her in as a gust tries to lift the roof. She tucks her face against his shoulder, and for a long, mean time they simply hang on. When the worst is blown through, the world is muffled, strange. They step outside into a new country where drifts of powder lean against the walls, and the chicken coop is half buried. The barn stands by grace, by the extra braces Luke hammered in last fall, who knows? The horses huddle, eyes rolling but alive. The cow bawls. Most of the chickens survived by smothering themselves into a corner and waiting. Could have been worse, Luke says, and means it. They dig out together, trading the shovel when hands cramp. When the bucket runs dry, she's already halfway to the well. When a bean wants 2 bodies, he's there without a word. When the sun slides down and the sky goes purple, they end up on the steps, sweat dried to salt, dust turning them both the same color. You shoot straight, he says into the quiet. My first husband made me learn, she replies. Said a woman alone needs more than prayers. You saved our horses, he says. Then here's what he said. Our, she echoes soft. He shrugs, embarrassed and not sorry. You're here. You work. Feels like ours. They sit without needing to fill the air. Stars come out, fierce and close after the storm scrubs the sky. After a while, she asks, Why weren't you married before this? A man like you land work. He snorts. A man like me has rough edges and a talent for finding trouble. Women who looked twice mostly wanted to sand me down into a shopkeeper. I don't fit in a town. I barely fit in a shirt. He looks over. You? A shadow of a smile ghosts her mouth, then goes. Thomas was a good man. We were building something I could be proud of. The mind took him. It didn't ask if I was ready. I'm sorry, he says, and means it like a prayer. Me too. But I'm still here. She lifts her chin to the stars. That has to count. The next morning brings a buggy with Eleanor Patterson and her bright-eyed daughter Sarah, baskets piled high. Eleanor hugs Amara like it's the most natural thing in the world. Sarah gasps at the quilt on the peg. Can you teach me that pattern, Mrs. Morrison? She asks, breathless. Of course, Amara says, startled into a real smile. After they go, she stands in the doorway, looking after the dust their wheels raised. It's been a long time since someone treated me like just a woman, she says quietly. Not a colored woman. Not a widow. Just a neighbor. You are, Luke says. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Footsteps later, he tenses, but it's Sheriff Ben Carter with a deputy. Morning, Carter says, peering at the half-buried coop and the men's tracks scissoring the yard. Found 3 bodies out on the flats. Storm got him. Looked like horse thieves to me. You know anything about that? They came here first, Luke says. We told them to move along. Self-defense and God's wind, the sheriff says, tipping his hat. I'll put it down as misadventure. After he leaves, Amara sits at the table a long time, hands folded. We helped kill men, she says. Even if the storm did the final work. He lowers himself across from her, feeling the ache everywhere. It's never nothing, he says. But those men wrote their own end. You chose to survive. She lifts her eyes. We chose, she corrects softly. That night, when he reaches for his blankets, she says, no more pretending your back's made of iron. Blanket down the middle. Sleep like a human. He hesitates, then nods. They settle in shoulder-width apart, the ridge between them like a river they both pretend not to notice. Somewhere beyond the walls coyotes sing, and the sound isn't lonely tonight. It's wild, and it's honest, and for the first time since a gambler's laugh turned a saloon mean, Luke thinks maybe, just maybe, the story can be written by their hands and not by the men who stacked the deck. The next weeks passed in a rhythm neither Luke nor Amara had planned, but both grew into. Mornings began before first light, Luke chopping kindling while Amara stoked the stove, coffee bubbling, cornbread or biscuits made from flour stretched thin. By daylight, Luke was out mending fences, tending stock, or riding the line, and Amara was hauling water, washing clothes, or patching seams until her fingertips stoned dot. The strange thing wasn't how much work there. Work was the only sure thing on a homestead. It was how natural it became to share it. He'd come in with arms full of wood and find she'd cleared a space by the stove. She'd step out with a wash bucket and find he'd already filled it at the pump. Neither talked about it, but the unspoken rhythm beat steady, like 2 horses finding the same gait on the trail. Still, the marriage was no secret. Cheyenne Creek was a town that fed on gossip the way a fire fed on dry cedar, and it wasn't long before the whispers turned to open commentary. Luke and Amara walked into the mercantile one bright morning, needing nails, coffee, and a spool of strong thread. The place fell silent, as though a storm had rolled through. Martha Henderson's voice carried across the shelves. Well, if it isn't Mr. Morrison and his new bride. How modern. Amara's back stiffened, but she held her chin high. Luke's jaw twitched, and he set the nails on the counter harder than he meant to. Eleanor Patterson, who had been sorting jars of preserves, stepped up beside Amara. "That blue calico looks fine on you," she said warmly, patting Amara's arm. "Makes me think of spring sky." The words were small, but they sliced through the tension like a knife through butter. Amara inclined her head, gratitude flickering in her eyes. Luke caught Eleanor's meaning. Not everyone in Cheyenne Creek played Hartley and Blackwood's game, but Blackwood himself wasn't far. He sauntered out of the bank one afternoon as Luke hitched the wagon, smiling with all the smugness of a man who believed the world spun to his tune. "I trust married life agrees with you, Morrison," he said, voice dripping honey. "Be sure to keep up with those payments. Wouldn't want misfortune to strike so soon." Luke's fists itched for the man's jaw, but Amara's hand brushed his sleeve, steady as bedrock. "We're managing just fine, Mr. Blackwood," she said coolly. "I find disappointment sits poorly on you. Do take care not to choke on it." The banker's smile faltered. Luke bit back a grin. He had to admit she carried her battles like a General Dot at the cabin. Evenings softened into something different. After supper, Amara spread her quilt across her lap, fingers working patterns that told stories older than Wyoming territory. Luke whittled by lamplight, the shavings piling at his boots. One night, curiosity got the better of him. "What do those patterns mean?" She glanced up, needle poised. "This one's for the road I walked. This one for the home I lost. And this," she touched a star-shaped stitch, "for hope that doesn't die even when you think it has." Luke stared at the neat stitches, each one carrying more truth than most men managed with words. He nodded slowly. Strong quilt. Her mouth curved into the faintest smile. Strong hands make strong patterns. The silence after wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, filled with the hum of crickets and the crackle of the fire. But not every night was peaceful. 2 weeks after the dust storm, trouble rode again. Luke heard the hoofbeats first, low thunder rolling up the valley. He stepped outside, rifle in hand, and counted 6 riders cresting the ridge. They weren't townsfolk. Bandanas masked their faces, and pistols glinted in the fading light. "Even in Morrison," the leader called. "Word is you're keeping good horseflesh. We'll take 'em off your hands." Luke's voice was calm, but steel edged it. "Turn back. You're not welcome here," laughter answered. "What's 1 man against 6? Or maybe we take that woman of yours to make it worth the ride." The words hung, sharp in the twilight. Amara appeared in the doorway, shotgun cradled, eyes fierce. "You'll have to come through me first," she said. The outlaws hesitated, not used to seeing a woman stand so steady. The leader spat. "You got grit, lady, but grit don't stop bullets." Luke's grip tightened. He leaned close to Amara. "Keep their eyes on you." "I'll circle." She nodded, never wavering, and fired a warning shot that cracked into the dirt at their horses' feet. The outlaws cursed, scattering. In that moment of confusion, Luke moved low, fast, flanking wide. He dropped one rider with a clean shot, then another. The rest pulled back, cursing and firing wild dot by the time the dust cleared. 2 men lay wounded, and the rest fled into the gathering dark. Amara lowered the shotgun slowly, breath shaking, but hands still steady. Luke came back around, chest heaving. Their eyes met hers bright with defiance, his with something like awe. "You shoot like you've done it before," he said. "My husband taught me," she replied, voice low but sure. "He said a woman alone needs more than prayers." Luke nodded. He was right. The fire crackled as night settled. Inside, the cabin walls seemed stronger somehow, as if the storm outside had only hardened what lived within. Morning came sharp and cold, a kind of prairie dawn where frost clung to fence posts and the sky stretched pink and silver over endless plains. Amara rose first, stoking the stove until the cabin warmed, the scent of coffee and frying salt pork cutting through the chill. Luke stirred in the other room, boots thudding on the floorboards. They hadn't spoken much after the attack. Too much adrenaline, too much danger still humming in their veins. But in the silence of the morning, something new had settled, a quiet recognition that each had stood, unflinching when tested. Luke stepped into the kitchen, hair damp from a splash at the pump, eyes tired but steady. He caught sight of Amara at the stove, her braid brushing her back as she leaned over the pan. "Smells like survival," he said. She glanced at him, a half-smile twitching at her lips. "Better than death, I reckon." They ate in near silence, only the scrape of forks and the faint hiss of bacon grease filling the space. Yet beneath it, a thread of ease had woven itself between them. Thin but strong as rawhide. Later, Luke hitched the wagon. "Need to check the north fence. You can ride with me or stay." Amara wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll come. My stitches won't mend wire." He nodded once, and together they rode. The prairie stretched before them, grass stiff and brittle under the early frost. Hawks wheeled overhead, and somewhere far off a coyote yee-pee-pee-ed dot at the broken stretch of fence. Luke set to work with practiced hands, driving posts deep into the hard earth. Amara fetched tools, held wire taut, hammered when he asked. No complaint passed her lips, though blisters bloomed at her palms. Finally, Luke straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. He caught her watching him, eyes bright, chin set with stubborn pride. "You work like you've done this all your life," he said. "I worked harder for less," she answered. "At least here the work keeps wolves away." Luke looked at her then, really looked, at the strength that had carried her through loss and scorn, through storms and outlaws. Respect stirred, deeper than he'd expected. Back in Cheyenne Creek a few days later, the whispers had sharpened to open venom. At the Mercantile, Martha Henderson leaned against the counter, voice loud enough for all to hear. "A decent man wouldn't chain a woman to his debts." "Guess decency ain't in the Morrison blood." Luke bristled, but Amara stepped forward, calm as winter ice. "Better a man with debts than one with empty hands and a sharp tongue." "At least debts can be paid." The room went still. Martha flushed scarlet, and Eleanor Patterson gave Amara the barest nod of approval. Luke's pride swelled. She wasn't just enduring his world, she was shaping her own place in it. Outside, as they loaded supplies, Luke muttered, "You didn't have to say that." Amara adjusted the sacks in the wagon bed. "I said it because it was true. You keep building fences. I'll keep mine with words." Luke chuckled, low and surprised. "Reckon we'll keep the wolves out yet." That night, back at the cabin, the air was thick with the smell of fresh bread Amara had coaxed from their dwindling flour. Luke sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. Amara sat opposite, mending a torn sleeve. The silence between them was different, now not strained, not wary, but filled with something unnamed. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. Luke broke it first. "You ever think about leaving? Starting somewhere no one knows your name?" Amara's needle stilled. "Every day. But running makes you a shadow." "I'm tired of shadows." He nodded slowly, eyes catching the firelight. "Maybe we both are." The flames popped, and outside a wolf howled, long and lonesome. But inside, the cabin felt less empty, less fragile. Two lives, bound not by choice, but by necessity, had begun to weave something sturdier than either expected, and neither quite dared admit they wanted it to hold. Winter crept into the valley with iron fingers, laying frost on every fence post and dusting the ridges with snow. The cabin, rough-hewn and drafty in places, became the heart of Luke and Amara's strange union. The stove glowed near constant, logs piled high, the air thick with the mingled scents of wood smoke, coffee, and bread. Amara had taken to humming as she worked snatches of hymns, folk songs, sometimes tunes Luke didn't know. At first he thought it strange, but over time, he found himself listening for it. The soft rise and fall weaving warmth through the coldest mornings. One evening, as snow pressed hard against the windows, and the wind moaned like some restless spirit, Luke sat whittling by the fire. Amara bent over her quilt, paused with her needle halfway through a stitch. "You never asked me where I came from," she said softly. Luke set down his knife. "Figured you'd tell me when you were ready." Her eyes flickered in the lamplight. "I was born in Arkansas. Married young. Thought it'd mean safety, a roof, children maybe. Instead, it meant fists and debts. When he died, I thought I was free. But his creditors came faster than the preacher." Luke's jaw tightened. He'd known men like that, men who treated women as property, debts as chains. "So you ran." Her gaze met his, steady. "I ran, and they branded me a thief. All I carried were scars and a name the law could twist against me." Silence stretched, heavy but not bitter. Luke's voice came quiet. "You're stronger than most I've met. Stronger than me most days." She blinked at that, then bent back to her quilt, but her hands trembled just enough for him to notice. The next week brought another test. Word arrived from town. Hartley's men had begun circling again, asking questions. Blackwood himself had sent notice. Payments overdue, property subject to seizure. Luke read the letter at the table, his jaw hard as the frozen ground. "He aims to drive us out. Doesn't matter if I pay, he'll raise the note higher, twist the numbers. Always has." Amara's lips pressed tight. "So we fight?" He looked up, surprised at her bluntness. "You ready for that?" "I didn't walk out of Arkansas just to hand myself back to another man's rope." Her voice was steady, sharp as tempered steel. "If he comes, we'll meet him together." Luke studied her, and something settled inside him. Respect, admiration, maybe even something he dared not name yet. That night, the storm outside howled fierce, rattling the shutters. Inside, warmth pooled around the stove, casting gold across the rough-hewn walls. Luke poured coffee, sliding a cup across the table. "Amara," he said, her name rough in his mouth, unused but familiar now. "When I married you, I thought it was just survival. Thought I was saving us both from ruin." She looked up, eyes catching firelight. "And now?" His hands curled around the cup. "Now I reckon it saved more than that. Saved me from silence, from losing myself out here." Her lips parted, surprise softening her face. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, sparks swirling in the iron stove. Then she reached across the table, fingertips brushing his hand just once, featherlight but real. "Maybe we both were saved." The touch lingered, fragile as the snow-laden branches outside. But it was enough. Asterisk, the thaw came late that year, reluctant as a mule at a river crossing. Snowmelt carved muddy veins through the pasture, and the cattle bawled for new grass. Luke rode fence lines with his hat pulled low, boots heavy with mud, while Amara worked the cabin yard, sleeves rolled, hair bound back, hands red from scrubbing and mending. Life was work hard, endless, bone deep, but it carried a strange comfort. The silence between them no longer gnawed. It rested, steady as a heartbeat, broken by simple words, a shared glance, the clatter of dishes set side by side. One evening, Luke returned from town with supplies rattling in the wagon bed. He tossed a small parcel onto the table. "Figured you could use this." Amara opened it carefully, fingers brushing against folded cloth, a length of sturdy calico in rich indigo. She blinked, surprised. "Why?" Luke shrugged, setting his hat aside. "Your dress is near worn through. Thought you might like something that's yours." Her throat tightened. She'd long since stopped expecting gifts, let alone ones without strings. She touched the fabric as though it might vanish. "Thank you," she said, voice low. "Don't thank me. You've earned it 10 times over." He busied himself with the stove, but she caught the way his ears burned pink in the lamplight. Cheyenne Creek buzzed with whispers soon after. Hartley, the banker, had raised Luke's debt again, claiming interest compounded per agreement. Men spat tobacco juice when his name came up, but none dared challenge him. Luke heard it all when he stopped by the saloon for nails and a drink. Hartley leaned against the bar like he owned the place, which, in a sense, he nearly did. "You're behind, Morrison," he drawled, swirling brandy in a glass too fine for this dust-bitten town. "Land's worth more than you. Might as well hand it over before you drown in paper." Luke's jaw clenched. "I've paid you straight, every dime, and you'll keep paying, and I'll keep raising. That's business." Hartley smiled, slick and cruel. "A man alone can't win this game." Luke left without a word, but fury burned deep. At the wagon, Eleanor Patterson caught his arm. "Don't let him rattle you, Luke. Folks see more than he thinks. You're not as alone as he wants you to believe." Her words stuck with him all the way home. That night, he told Amara what Hartley had said. She set aside her sewing, eyes flashing. "He'll bleed you dry, then take the land when you can't stand." Luke rubbed a hand over his face. "I know." "Then fight him," she said. "Not with fists. With proof. With people. He counts on fear, but fear crumbles when folks stand together." Luke looked at her, half in awe. "You think anyone in this valley would risk crossing him?" She held his gaze unwavering. "They'll risk it if they see someone worth following." Her words landed heavy. For years, Luke had carried his fight alone. Now, for the first time, he wondered if standing with her might mean he didn't have to. The cabin that spring felt less like shelter and more like home. Amara planted a small patch of garden near the pump beans, corn, herbs. Luke built her a proper fence around it, hammer ringing in the crisp morning air. One afternoon, she caught him leaning on the post, watching her work. "What?" she asked, brushing dirt from her cheek. He shook his head, a slow smile tugging at his mouth. "Nothin'. Just never thought I'd see this place look like more than a camp." "You did that." Her pulse jumped. She bent back to the soil, hiding the warmth that flushed her face. "We did that," she corrected, and when their hands brushed later passing a tin cup, too close at the table neither pulled away quite as quick. The weeks rolled on, warm winds sweeping the snowmelt into the river bottoms. Wildflowers spread across the prairie like spilled paint. To a stranger, the valley might have looked peaceful, but Luke felt the storm gathering, heavy as thunder in the distance. Hartley wasn't content with raising interest. He'd begun sending his men to inspect Luke's property riding close to the barn, counting cattle that weren't theirs, asking questions with smirks that carried threat more than curiosity. Luke returned from one ride fuming, his knuckles white around the reins. Amara met him at the fence, worry carved in her brow. "They were here again," he said flatly. "I saw them," she replied. "One tried to ride through the garden. I stood with the rifle." He turned tail quick enough. Luke's chest swelled with pride and dread. "It's only going to get worse." The following Sunday, Reverend Mills preached a sermon about Daniel in the lion's den. Amara noticed the way his gaze lingered on Luke and herself, and she knew the message wasn't accidental. Afterward, the townsfolk gathered in knots on the dusty street, whispering. Some turned their shoulders coldly as Luke and Amara passed. Others offered quiet nods of respect. The valley was splitting in two. That evening, Luke sat sharpening his knife while Amara mended shirts by lamplight. The scrape of steel on stone echoed in the cramped cabin. "Luke," she said softly, "do you trust me?" His hand stilled. He looked up, meeting her steady eyes. "With my life, then let me help. Not just with mending and planting. With this fight." You said once you've always stood alone. You don't have to anymore. He swallowed hard, the words striking something raw. I don't want you in danger. I already am, she answered simply. By being your wife. By being who I am in this place. The truth of it sat heavy between them. Luke reached across the table, covering her hand with his calloused one. For a moment, the storm outside and within went still. 2 nights later, they woke to the distant bawl of cattle and the sharp crack of a rifle. Luke leapt from bed, snatching his rifle. Amara closed behind with the shotgun. Out by the pasture, shadows moved against the moonlight. Hartley's men, driving cattle toward the creek. Luke fired a warning shot. The shadows scattered, cursing, but not before one hurled a torch into the dry grass. Flame licked upward, hungry in the night wind. Get the water. Luke barked, sprinting toward the fire. Amara ran for the bucket line without hesitation, skirts flying. Together, side by side, they fought the blaze-hauling water, stamping out sparks, choking on smoke. By dawn, they'd beaten it back, but the air reeked of scorched earth, and 2 head of cattle lay dead. Luke dropped to his knees in the blackened field, chest heaving. Amara knelt beside him, laying a soot-streaked hand on his shoulder. They want you broken, she said. But you're not. We're not. He looked at her hair loose, face smudged, eyes fierce, and something shifted deep inside. You're right, he said hoarsely. We fight, together. The next day, Luke rode to Patterson's ranch. Tom met him at the corral, wiping sweat from his brow. Need to talk, Luke said. Tom's gaze hardened. I heard about the fire. Hartley's behind it? Who else? Luke replied, but I can't beat him alone. None of us can. He'll come for you next, and the Kowalskis and the Schmidts. We've got to stand together, or we'll all be picked off one by one. Tom was silent a long time, jaw working. Finally, he nodded. You've got my hand, Luke, and Eleanor's too. You call the others, we'll come. For the first time since the cursed night of that poker game, Luke felt something like hope. That evening, back at the cabin, he found Amara hanging laundry in the golden light. He told her of Tom's pledge. She smiled, weary but radiant. See? You're not alone anymore. Luke stepped closer, his shadow mingling with hers. No, not anymore. Her eyes held his, steady and searching. For a long moment, the world hushed the prairie wind, the creak of the line, even his restless heart. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The fight with Hartley was far from over. But as the sun sank behind the mountains, Luke knew one truth with bone-deep certainty. Whatever came, he and Amara would face it as one. The valley seemed quieter in the days that followed, but Luke had ridden the range long enough to know when calm was just the air before a storm. Hartley hadn't forgotten the fire or the defiance. He was biding his time. Luke and Amara worked from dawn till dusk, mending fences, tending stock, and coaxing life back into the blackened pasture. Amara planted fast-growing beans where the grass had burned away, insisting the land would heal if given care. Watching her, skirts gathered, hands deep in soil, Luke felt a stirring that had nothing to do with desire alone. It was admiration, respect, something he'd never expected to feel so fiercely for a woman bound to him by chance. You believe this place can be whole again? He asked one evening, leaning on the hoe as the sun bled across the sky. Amara straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. The earth always recovers, Luke. Question is, will we? A week later, Trouble rode back into Cheyenne Creek. Hartley himself led the column of horsemen down the main street, dust swirling around iron-shod hooves. Townsfolk stopped what they were doing, whispering nervously. Hartley dismounted in front of the bank, silver spurs jingling, and his voice carried like a judge's gavel. This town's gone soft, he barked. Letting a ranch hand and his colored wife stir up trouble. I won't have it. Luke, who'd come to trade, stepped forward. You won't have a say in it, Hartley. Folks here are tired of bowing to you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Hartley's lip curled. Careful, Orison. Your new money barely money at all. Don't mistake luck at cards and pity from your neighbors for power. Before Luke could answer, Amara emerged from Henderson's store, a sack of flour balanced easily in her arms. Hartley's gaze snapped to her, cold and contemptuous. You do well to remember your place, Mrs. Morrison, he sneered. Some of us don't take kindly to uppity women, especially of your background. The street went silent, the insult hanging like smoke. Amara's chin lifted, her voice clear and steady. My place is beside my husband, working this land, building something worth more than all your cattle, Mr. Hartley. And no insult from you will change that. The crowd stirred. Some looked away, ashamed. Others, like Eleanor Patterson, nodded faintly in support. Hartley saw it too, and his scowl deepened. This ain't over, he growled, mounting up. Not by a long shot. His men wheeled and followed, hooves pounding like distant thunder. That night, Luke and Amara sat by the fire. The log crackled, shadows dancing across their weary faces. You didn't have to speak up, Luke murmured. Yes, I did, Amara said simply. If we let him define us, then he's already won. He studied her profile, lit by lamplight. Strength radiated from her, not the kind born of muscle, but of spirit. And Luke realized with startling clarity that he couldn't imagine life without her. A few days later, the alliance of neighbors Luke had been building came together in earnest. Families gathered in Patterson's barn, lanterns glowing against the dark. Men and women filled the space with nervous energy, the air thick with sweat and determination. We can't fight Hartley alone, Luke told them, his voice carrying above the murmurs. But together we stand a chance. No more cattle driven through our fences. No more fires. No more fear. Murmurs turned to nods, then to agreement. Eleanor Patterson rose, her hands clasped. Mrs. Morrison is right. Dignity is our sharpest weapon, but unity is our shield. We'll stand together. For the first time, Luke felt the weight on his shoulders ease. They weren't alone anymore. But Hartley wasn't finished. The very next dawn, riders came again, not to steal cattle this time, but to leave a message. Luke found the body of his best horse, shot through the heart, sprawled in the corral. The mare Amara had ridden to town, had been slashed across the flank. Still trembling from pain, Luke knelt in the dirt, fists clenched, breath ragged. Rage boiled in his chest, black and consuming. I'll kill him, he whispered. Amara knelt beside him, touching his arm. That's what he wants, Luke, for you to lose yourself, for you to fall into his game. Her touch steadied him just enough. He met her eyes, saw fire and grief there too, and nodded. Then we fight smarter, he said. That evening they buried the horse on the rise overlooking the homestead. As Luke shoveled earth, Amara laid a wildflower wreath across the mound. They stood together in silence, the wind tugging at their clothes, the horizon burning with sunset. The war with Hartley had turned cruel. But as Luke wrapped an arm around Amara's shoulders, he knew this. Whatever the cost, he wouldn't let her or their hard-won life be taken. Valley would either break them or forge them into something stronger than Hartley could ever imagine. The summer sun blazed hot over Cheyenne Creek, but the heat in the valley came from more than the sky. Hartley's men grew boulder-cutting fence lines in daylight, driving cattle through planted fields, poisoning the well of the Kowalski family. Fear spread like fire in dry grass. Yet so did defiance. Families began riding patrols at night, rifles across their laps, lanterns swinging. Luke and Amara knew it was coming, the day Hartley would make his final play. And when it came, it arrived with the rumble of hooves. It was near dusk when Amara spotted dust rising beyond the ridge. "Riders," she said, steady though her hands tightened on the bucket she carried. Luke squinted toward the horizon. "At least a dozen men. Armed. They're coming here." He sent her inside, then took up position near the barn, rifle ready. But Amara returned a moment later, shotgun in hand. "You're not facing this alone," she said firmly. A lump rose in Luke's throat. He nodded, heart pounding. The riders swept into the yard like a storm, Hartley at their head, silver spurs flashing. His face was twisted with fury. "You think you can shame me in front of the valley?" He shouted, dismounting. "You think you can steal respect that belongs to me?" "This land was never yours," Luke answered. "And it never will be," Hartley sneered. "You are nothing but a drunk bronc buster. Now you play farmer with this." His eyes cut to Amara, voice dripping poison. "Charity case." Amara's chin lifted. "I am no man's charity." The standoff hung like a held breath. Then one of Hartley's men lit a torch, hurling it toward the barn. Flame leapt against dry wood. Luke fired first. The torchbearer dropped. Chaos exploded, gunfire cracking, horses screaming. Neighbors who had lain in wait Patterson shunned. Schmidt burst from cover, rifles blazing. The alliance had been ready. Smoke thickened as men shouted and fought. Amara fired both barrels, reloading quick as lightning, her voice ringing out. "Stand your ground." Luke cut down 2 riders charging the garden, then turned to see Hartley himself striding toward the cabin, revolver raised. "Luke!" Amara's warning came just as Hartley fired. The bullet tore past Luke's shoulder, grazing him. Pain seared, but he stayed on his feet. With a roar, he tackled Hartley. They hit the dirt hard, fists flying. Years of rage poured out in every blow Luke landed. Hartley clawed and struck back, but Luke was younger, stronger, fueled by fury and something more, love, pride, the will not to lose Dot at last. Luke's fist smashed Hartley's revolver hand, sending the gun spinning. He pressed the barrel of his own rifle to Hartley's chest. "Do it!" Hartley spat blood, eyes blazing. "You're no better than me unless you kill me." The world stilled. Neighbors ringed them, weapons drawn, waiting. Amara's voice cut through the silence. "Luke, don't give him what he wants." Their eyes met. Her strength flowed into him, steadying his breath. Slowly, Luke lowered the rifle. "Sheriff will take you," he said. Alive, and so he did. Sheriff Carter and deputies arrived before dawn, leading Hartley and his broken men away in chains. The valley exhaled at last. Weeks later, Cheyenne Creek looked different. Not free of scars, but stronger for them. Fields grew green again. Families worked side by side. A meeting house rose on land the Morrisons had donated. Luke and Amara stood at its threshold one Sunday morning, hand in hand. He glanced down at her, the sun haloing her face, and felt that same fierce awe he'd known from the first. "Never thought losing a bet could win me everything." "He," murmured Dot. She smiled, soft and radiant. "You didn't lose, Luke. You just didn't know the prize." He laughed, pulling her close, kissing her as bells rang in the distance. Life in the Wyoming Territory would never be simple. Prejudice lingered, storms would come, and land would always be hard. But Luke and Amara had built more than a ranch. They'd built a partnership, a love born of fire and trial, strong enough to face whatever came. And in the valley they now called home, folks would tell their story for years. How a cowboy lost a bet and found the wife, the land, and the future of his dreams.